The air in Iowa pulsed with energy. Flags rippled in the breeze, camera shutters clicked, and thousands pressed together around a makeshift stage set up in the middle of an open field. President Donald Trump was scheduled to speak. His remarks centered on farm reforms, subsidies, and the uphill battles of rural America. Families had driven in from nearby counties, some carrying hope, others wearing skepticism, but all eager to listen. Among them was Clara Dawson, a 38-year-old widow. Years of hard labor had carved roughness into her hands and lines across her face, weathered by both sun and hardship. In the pocket of her faded dress, she carried a folded letter, not just paper, but the last words of her late husband, Ethan Dawson, who had died months earlier of a heart attack brought on by exhaustion and financial strain. Clara had never sought the spotlight. Her strength was quiet, steady, the kind that survives rather than shouts. But today, something inside her stirred. She hadn't come to speak, yet Ethan's words weighed on her heart. Pushing her forward, Trump appeared on stage to thunderous applause. With a confident smile, he raised his hand and began to speak about the strength of America's backbone. Farmers, the audience cheered. Clara's chest tightened. Each phrase echoed the promises Ethan had once clung to, promises he never lived long enough to see fulfilled. The president's words soared, but inside Clara, a storm gathered. She could remain silent, fading into the shadows like so many widows before her. Or she could rise, risk everything, and give Ethan's words the voice he no longer had. Her hand pressed against the letter. For the first time since Ethan's death, she was ready. Clara and Ethan had married young, building a small farm from nothing, a patch of cornfields, a red barn, and a modest white house that always smelled of fresh bread. Ethan worked sunup to sundown, and Clara balanced housework with bookkeeping, harvests, and endless repairs. Life was never simple, but they shared dreams. Ethan wanted to pass the land on to their 10-year-old son, Luke. One day this farm will be his, he would say, pointing across the glowing fields at sunset. But dreams crashed against reality. Equipment costs rose, crop prices dropped, and the weather grew increasingly unpredictable. Ethan worked harder, often skipping meals. Clara pleaded with him to slow down, but he always smiled. Just one more season, Clara, things will get better. They didn't. Single quotes T.1 Cold November morning. Ethan collapsed in the barn. By the time Clara reached him, his work-worn hands were cold, his blue eyes closed forever. The doctor called it stress-induced cardiac arrest. Clara called it the farm that killed him. The funeral was small. Neighbors brought casseroles, hugged Luke, and whispered about life's unfairness. Clara felt as though half her soul had been buried with Ethan. Weeks later, sorting through his desk, she found a sealed envelope with her name scrawled across it. Inside was a letter not just for her, but for the world. Now, standing in the Iowa crowd, she felt its weight like a stone in her pocket. Ethan had died unheard. She would not let his words vanish too. Trump's voice carried over the prairie wind, praising farmers for their grit and sacrifice. He promised relief, better trade deals, stronger protections, new investments in rural America. The crowd cheered again, signs lifted high, "Farmers feed America." Clara listened, her palms damp. She looked down at Luke, his wide eyes fixed. On the stage, not yet grasping the cost of their loss or what his mother was about to do. Her heartbeat thundered. She couldn't wait. This was her moment. Clara pushed through the crowd, drawing murmurs as she stepped into the open aisle. Security tensed, eyes narrowing. "Mr. President," she called, her voice trembling but steady enough to pierce the noise. The crowd fell silent. Trump paused, scanning faces until his gaze found the woman with tear-bright eyes and calloused hands raised high. Whispers rippled. Who was she? Why interrupt? Clara's fingers clutched the letter. Her chest ached, but she stood firm. "Please, Mr. President," she said, lifting her hand higher. "I need to speak." Trump lifted his hand, halting the guards who had begun to move. Curiosity flickered through the audience. "What's your name, ma'am?" he asked into the microphone. "Clara Dawson," she answered, her voice cracking. "I'm a farmer's widow. My husband Ethan loved this land, and it killed him." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Luke squeezed her hand, his face pale. Clara pulled the letter from her pocket, her hands shaking. "He wrote this for you, for all of us. I can't stay silent anymore." Trump studied her, then stepped back from the podium. "Come forward." The crowd parted, all eyes on Clara and Luke as they walked toward the stage. She had never faced an audience this large, let alone stood beside the President of the United States. Her knees shook, but Ethan's words anchored her. At the microphone, her voice faltered but did not break. "My husband left this before he passed. He believed someone needed to hear it." She unfolded the paper and began to read, tears blurring the ink. "Dear Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let my death be silent. Tell them farmers aren't lazy, we're drowning. Every day we fight storms, debts, and broken promises. But we work because this land isn't just soil, it's hope. Promise me you'll speak for us. Promise me, our son, will know I fought until the end." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. If you ever meet a leader, tell him not to forget us. Tell him behind every field is a family, and behind every family is a dream that should not die with me. Clara lowered the letter, her tears falling. Silence engulfed the field. Flags rustled in the wind. The only sound was her soft sobs. Then, slowly, a farmer in the front row removed his cap, holding it to his chest. Another followed. Soon dozens, then hundreds, mirrored the gesture. Clara lifted her head in shock. They weren't angry. They were moved because Ethan's words were theirs too. Trump's voice came softer than usual. That was powerful. Very powerful. He turned toward Clara. Your husband sounds like a man who loved his family, his land, and his country. Clara swallowed hard. He did. All he wanted was for farmers like him not to be forgotten. The applause that followed wasn't political. It was human, slow, steady clapping that swelled into a wave. Clara bent toward Luke. Your father's voice is being heard, sweetheart. For the first time in months, she felt Ethan close, proud, strong, unbroken. Trump looked out across the crowd, his tone no longer triumphant but reverent. This is America, he said. A farmer's words, a family's struggle, a legacy worth more than any policy. The audience roared with approval, some even chanting Ethan's name. Clara's tears flowed freely, not just from grief, but from hope. When the applause finally faded, Trump leaned closer to Clara, his voice softer. Your story reminds me of someone. My father worked every day of his life. Different kind of work, but the same grit. Farmers are the backbone of this country. I can't ignore that. Clara nodded, unsure what to say. She hadn't come for politics only to carry Ethan's words forward. Yet something in Trump's tone felt genuine. Luke tugged at her dress. Mom, Daddy would be so happy right now. She hugged him tightly. Yes, sweetheart, he would. Trump returned to the microphone. You know what? We're going to act today. Not tomorrow, not someday, today. Ethan's words will live on. The crowd erupted, while Clara stood frozen. What did that mean? Trump pointed toward her. This woman is braver than most leaders I've met. She came here with nothing but a letter, and she moved us all. That is courage. Clara's cheeks burned. She hadn't thought of herself as brave, just desperate to make Ethan's truth heard. But suddenly she understood. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was speaking despite it. Then Trump asked the crowd, who else here has a story like Ethan's? Hands shot up everywhere. Farmers shouted about near bankruptcies, lost land, endless hours, and broken promises. Tears flowed as men and women spoke of sacrifice and survival. The rally shifted. It wasn't about policy anymore. It was about people. Clara listened, her heart breaking yet strangely relieved. So many shared her struggle. Ethan's words had given them permission to speak. Luke squeezed her hand. Mom, they're like us. Yes, she whispered. We're not alone. The field, filled with voices, raw, unfiltered, united, neighbors embraced. Farmers wiped tears. Even Trump stood quieter than usual, nodding. Clara realized then, her interruption had sparked more than sympathy. It had started a movement. Trump lifted his hand. This is leadership, not just speeches, but listening. Clara, thank you. You reminded us all what matters. Clara shook her head softly. It wasn't me, it was Ethan. Trump's expression shifted. Then, let's honor him properly. The crowd thundered, farmers, farmers, farmers. Their voices shook the air like rolling thunder. Clara stood taller, her husband's name echoing across the field like a promise fulfilled. Luke whispered, Mom, do you think Daddy can hear this? She kissed his forehead. I know he can. For the first time since Ethan's death, she didn't feel alone. She felt lifted by her son, by her community, by Ethan himself. After the rally, Trump approached Clara personally. Security hovered, but he waved them back. Clara, I want you to come to Washington, meet with my team, share Ethan's letter. Let's see what can be done. She hesitated. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can, Trump said firmly. You already did something remarkable today. Luke's eyes widened. Mom, we'd go to the White House. Clara smiled faintly. It sounds that way. Trump pressed a card into her hand. My staff will call tomorrow. Don't lose this. She nodded, still dazed. She had only wanted to give Ethan's words a voice. Now, they were carrying her far beyond the farm. As Trump left, the crowd swarmed her with hugs and thanks. Clara realized Ethan's letter had already reached more than leaders, it had touched hearts. That night, lying beside her sleeping son, Clara whispered, Ethan, your words are going farther than we ever dreamed. For the first time in months, peace settled over her. Within a week, Clara and Luke were in Washington. For Luke, who had rarely left Iowa, the trip was a wonder. He marveled at plains, monuments, and the dome of the Capitol. Clara smiled through her nerves, clutching Ethan's letter in her purse like a torch. Inside the White House, Trump greeted them warmly. Clara, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. She replied. He leaned forward. I've read Ethan's letter in full. It's powerful. What if we made sure no farmer's family feels forgotten again? Clara's breath caught. For the first time, she realized Ethan's words weren't just echoing, they were shaping decisions in the highest office in the land. The next day, she stood beside Trump at a press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but the room fell still when she read Ethan's letter aloud once more. Even hardened journalists leaned in, visibly moved. Trump placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is why we fight for farmers, for families, for voices that must never be ignored." Tears filled Clara's eyes, not of grief this time, but of pride. Ethan's words had left the barn where they were written and reached the nation. Not all reactions were kind. Some media accused Clara of being a prop. Others doubted her story. She sat at her kitchen table, reading the criticism online. Doubt creeping in. "Maybe I shouldn't have gone," she whispered. Luke looked up. "Daddy always said truth is stronger than lies. Don't listen to them." His words pierced through her doubt. Clara closed the laptop and smiled faintly. "You're right, sweetheart." And soon letters began arriving, neighbors thanking her, farmers across the country sending support. Gratitude outweighed cynicism. Ethan's message was bigger than politics. It was human. Weeks later, Trump called again. "Clara, I want to do more than talk. We're starting the Ethan Dawson Farm Scholarship Fund. It'll help farmers' children pursue education while keeping their land alive." Clara gasped. "A scholarship in Ethan's name." Luke clapped his hands. "Mom, Daddy's name will help other kids." At the launch ceremony, Clara spoke softly. "Ethan never wanted fame. He only wanted our farm to survive. But today, his words are giving families something greater, hope for their children's future." Back on the farm, life slowly returned to its rhythm. The barn still creaked, the fields still swayed, and Ethan's boots still sat by the door. But Clara's grief no longer crushed her. It walked beside her, gentler now. Some evenings, she sat on the porch, whispering into the breeze. "We did it, Ethan. Your voice reached farther than we ever dreamed." The wind rustled the corn like an answer. Years later, people still told the story of the widow who interrupted Trump's speech with her husband's letter. Farmers passed it on as proof their voices mattered. Children studied with help from the Ethan Dawson Scholarship Fund. Clara never sought fame. She returned to her farm, raised Luke, and lived quietly. But in her heart, she carried pride, knowing Ethan's voice had changed lives. Sometimes, as twilight settled over the fields, she whispered to the wind, "We did it, love, we really did it." And the breeze seemed to applaud, because sometimes the most powerful speeches aren't given on podiums, they're written in barns, carried by ordinary people, and kept alive by love.